Sarah Miller never thought a quiet morning at her father's fishing dock would turn into a nightmare. The sudden, guttural sound of motorcycle engines shattered the peace at Eagles Crest Marina. In just moments, Sarah would find herself surrounded by the most notorious gang in 3 states, the Iron Serpents MC. They weren't known for their mercy, and as their leader circled her like a predator, she could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. But what these dangerous men didn't know, what nobody in town knew, was that her quiet, unassuming father was about to teach them the most brutal lesson of their lives. They thought Robert Bob Miller was just another small-town fisherman. They saw his weathered hands, his patient smile, his humble demeanor. They assumed he was weak, someone they could push around, someone whose daughter they could terrorize. They were about to learn how catastrophically wrong they were. In the next few minutes, the Iron Serpents would discover that they hadn't just picked on any fisherman's daughter. They had threatened a Navy SEAL's little girl. And some mistakes you only make once. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us where in the world are you watching from. If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The morning mist clung stubbornly to the surface of the lake at Eagles Crest Marina, where the gentle lapping of waves against wooden docks created a symphony of serenity. Sarah Miller stood at the edge of her father's weathered fishing pier, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. At 23, she moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent their entire life on these docks, checking equipment and preparing for another day of charter fishing tours. The calm morning shattered as the distant rumble of motorcycles echoed across the water. Sarah's hand paused on the rope she was coiling, her eyes drawn to the road leading into the marina. The sound grew louder, more menacing with each passing second. The Iron Serpents appeared like dark specters emerging through the morning haze, their chrome bikes gleaming under the rising sun. 5 riders, their leather cuts adorned with patches that spoke of territory and violence, pulled into the marina's gravel parking lot. Their leader, Jake Bulldog Thompson, killed his engine first. The sudden silence felt more threatening than the roar that preceded it. Sarah's fingers tightened around the rope, her knuckles white with tension. She'd heard stories about the Iron Serpents' whispered warnings in local diners about their reputation for violence and intimidation. But they'd never come to Eagles Crest Marina before. Not until today. Bulldog dismounted his bike with practiced ease, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. Well, what do we have here? His voice carried across the marina, dripping with false curiosity. Looks like someone's little girl is playing with boats. Sarah continued her work, trying to project a calm she didn't feel. The methodical motion of coiling the rope gave her something to focus on besides the approaching footsteps. This is a private charter business, she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Unless you have a booking, I'll need to ask you to leave. The bikers laughed, the sound harsh and echoing across the otherwise empty marina. Bulldog stepped closer, deliberately invading her personal space. His right-hand man, Mike Sullivan, flanked him, while the others spread out, creating a loose, intimidating circle around Sarah. A booking. Bulldog's lips curled into a smirk. Sweetheart, the Iron Serpents don't need bookings. We go where we want, when we want. Inside the small marina office, Tom Henderson watched through the window. His weathered face creased with deep concern. His hand reached for the phone, fingers trembling slightly as he dialed a number he knew by heart. Out on the lake, Bob Miller was patiently showing a young family the finer points of bass fishing when his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. Something in Tom's strained voice made him reel in his line immediately. "Everything okay at the dock?" "Tom." "Bob, you better get back here." The iron serpents just rolled in, and they're circling Sarah like sharks. Bob's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but his voice remained calm. "I'll be right there." He turned to his clients with an apologetic smile. "Folks, we're going to have to cut this morning's lesson short. Family emergency." Back at the dock, Bulldog had moved even closer to Sarah. He reached out, running a rough finger along the tightly coiled rope in her hands. "Nice knots. Your daddy teach you that. Must be real proud, having his little girl carry on the family business." Sarah stepped back, her spine straight. "I said you need to leave." Mike Sullivan laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Oh, she's got spirit. Bulldog. I like that. Makes it more fun when they fight back a little." Another biker, a hulking man they called Tank, moved to block Sarah's path to the marina office. Bulldog's smile faded slightly. "You know, we've been thinking about expanding our territory. Eagles Crest Marina seems like a nice little spot. Quiet. Peaceful." He looked around the marina with exaggerated interest. "Perfect place for a new clubhouse. Don't you think?" Sarah's heart raced, but she kept her voice level. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "Trespassing?" Bulldog threw his head back and laughed loudly. "Boys, you hear that? Little girl thinks she owns these docks." His expression darkened abruptly. "Let me explain something to you. Sweetheart, everything here, it belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it." He reached for the rope in Sarah's hands again, but she held firm. For a tense moment, they were locked in a silent battle of wills, neither willing to let go. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Sarah warned, though her voice trembled slightly. Bulldog's grip tightened. "And why is that? Your daddy going to come save you?" His voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "Where's Daddy? Anyway?" "Out playing fisherman while his little girl faces the big bad world alone." The other bikers closed in, their leather cuts creaking ominously as they moved. The morning sun caught on patches that read, "Iron Serpent MC," and "No Mercy" stitched into worn leather. "Maybe we should stick around," Mike Sullivan suggested, his eyes never leaving Sarah. "Show her how real men run a business." Sarah's mind raced. Her father was out on the lake, probably already heading back thanks to Tom's call. But she didn't know how long it would take him to return. She needed to buy time, keep the situation from escalating. "The sheriff makes regular patrols through here," she said, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "He'll be by any minute." Bulldog's smile widened cruelly. "No, he won't. See, we passed your local law enforcement about 10 miles back. Looked like he was dealing with a nasty accident on the highway. Could be there for hours." He released the rope suddenly, causing Sarah to stumble back slightly. "We've got all the time in the world." The bikers laughed again, but this time there was something darker, more predatory in the sound. Sarah glanced toward the marina office. where she could see Tom Henderson still on the phone, his face pale with concern. "Last chance," Sarah said, straightening her shoulders. "Leave now." "Or what?" Bulldog stepped even closer, towering over her. "You gonna make us?" "You in what army?" "Little girl." The steady rumble of an approaching boat engine cut through the tension. Sarah felt a flutter of relief in her chest, knowing that sound anywhere. Her father's charter boat was returning to the dock. Bulldog turned his head slightly at the sound, but didn't back away. "Looks like Daddy's coming home." "Good. Maybe he can teach us all about fishing." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "Always wanted to learn from a real professional." The morning sun finally broke through the mist as Bob Miller's boat smoothly approached the dock. From where she stood, Sarah could see her father's familiar figure at the helm, his movements calm and deliberate as he guided the vessel home. What the Iron Serpents didn't see, what they couldn't possibly know, was the way Bob's eyes scanned the situation, taking in every detail with the practiced precision of a man who had spent years in combat zones. They didn't notice how he was already noting their positions, analyzing angles, identifying threats. They saw only what they wanted to see, a simple fisherman returning to port, unaware that they were about to learn the true cost of threatening a Navy SEAL's daughter. The boat's engine cut off, leaving an expectant, heavy silence hanging over the marina. Bulldog turned back to Sarah, his smile cruel and confident. "Now the real fun begins." Bob Miller guided his boat smoothly to the dock with practiced ease, his movements deliberate and controlled. Nothing in his weathered face betrayed the rapid calculations running through his mind as he took in the scene before him. The five bikers had created a loose semicircle around Sarah, their leather cuts catching the morning sun, patches proclaiming their allegiance to the Iron Serpent's MC. He tied off the boat with swift, efficient motions, each movement precise. His clients, the young family he'd been teaching to fish, huddled nervously at the stern, sensing the thick tension in the air. "Head straight to your car," Bob told them quietly, his voice calm but brooking no argument. "Don't look back. Don't engage." The family hurried past the bikers, the father pulling his children close as they made their way quickly to the parking lot. Bulldog watched them go with obvious amusement, then turned his attention to Bob. "Well, if it isn't Daddy dearest," Bulldog called out, his voice carrying across the dock. "Just in time for the party." Bob stepped onto the dock, his worn work boots making solid contact with the wooden planks. He moved unhurriedly, each step measured and deliberate. To the bikers, he looked like any other middle-aged fisherman, weathered jeans, faded flannel shirt, years of sun etched into his face. They didn't notice the subtle shift in his balance, how he'd already mapped out every possible angle of approach, every potential weapon within reach: a gaff hook, a heavy cleat, the coiled rope itself. "Sarah," Bob said, his voice steady, "everything okay here?" Before Sarah could answer, Bulldog cut in sharply. "Oh, we've been taking real good care of your little girl, teaching her all about respect and how things work in the real world." Bob continued his measured approach, stopping a precise distance from the group. Enough space to react, not enough to seem confrontational. "Is that right?" His tone remained conversational, almost casual. But there was something hard glinting in his eyes that made Mike Sullivan shift uneasily. "Dad," Sarah started, but Bulldog talked over her again. "You know, we were just discussing business opportunities," Bulldog said, spreading his arms wide in a mocking gesture. "This marina, it's got potential. Lots of potential. Maybe it's time for some new management." Bob's expression didn't change, but something in the air shifted, grew colder. "I see. And you be the new management." Bulldog's smile widened. "Smart man. See, that's how things work. Strong take what they want. Weak learn to live with it. Or don't live with it. Their choice." "That's an interesting philosophy," Bob replied, his voice still deceptively calm. "Got a lot of experience with that. Do you?" One of the bikers, the hulking man named Ben Tank Carter, stepped forward aggressively. "You mocking us, old man?" "No," Bob said simply, his gaze steady on Tank before flicking back to Bulldog. "Just having conversation, trying to understand your position." He turned his attention fully back to the leader. "So, what exactly are you proposing here?" Bulldog laughed, but there was an edge to it now. Something about the old fisherman's unnerving calmness was starting to get under his skin. "Proposing? I ain't proposing anything. I'm telling you how it's going to be. This marina, it's Iron Serpent territory now. You want to keep running your little fishing tours. You pay us protection. Want to keep your pretty daughter safe." He let his gaze linger on Sarah. "You pay us more." Sarah started to protest again, indignation rising. But Bob raised his hand slightly. A gesture so subtle the bikers didn't even notice it. But Sarah fell silent immediately, recognizing the familiar signal from years of working alongside her father on the water. "Protection," Bob repeated thoughtfully, his eyes scanning the group, noting posture, hand positions, potential weapons. "From what?" "From us," Mike Sullivan sneered, stepping closer to Sarah again. "We'll be ashamed if something happened to your boats or your girl." Bob's eyes tracked Sullivan's movement, noting the way the biker's hand rested near his belt, where the distinct outline of a knife handle was visible beneath his leather cut. The other bikers were spreading out slightly, unconsciously moving into flanking positions, amateurish, but still a threat. "You're threatening my daughter," Bob stated, his voice still conversational, yet carrying a new weight. It wasn't a question. "Threatening." Bulldog affected an innocent expression, though his eyes were cold. No. Just explaining the facts of life. Strong survive. Weak, well, they learn their place." Bob nodded slowly, as if considering the point. "Understand. And you consider yourself strong." Something in his tone finally made Bulldog pause, a flicker of doubt crossing his face before he covered it with a harsh laugh. "Look around. Old man. 5 of us. 1 of you. Your daughter's pretty, but she doesn't count in this equation. Math ain't that hard, is it?" "Numbers can be deceiving," Bob replied mildly. Tank took another aggressive step forward, cracking his thick knuckles loudly. "Nothing deceiving about a beating. Old-timer." "Dad," Sarah said again, concern sharp in her voice. She'd seen her father calm before, but this was different. This was the kind of profound calm that often preceded a sudden, violent storm. "It's okay, Sarah," Bob assured her, his eyes never leaving Bulldog. These gentlemen are about to learn something important about strength. Bulldog's amusement finally began to fade, replaced by open irritation. The old man's continued calm was starting to feel like blatant disrespect. "Only thing getting learned here is you. Pops, last chance. You want to do this the easy way? Or are we giving your daughter a front row seat to watch her daddy get broken?" Bob took a single, deliberate step forward. The movement was so smooth, so controlled, that Bulldog unconsciously took a half step back before catching himself, flushing angrily. "Let me be clear," Bob said, his voice dropping slightly, losing its conversational tone and gaining a chilling edge. "You came to my marina. You threatened my daughter. You're talking about taking what isn't yours. That tells me you don't understand the first thing about real strength." "That right." Bulldog's hand moved to his back, where a heavy motorcycle chain was coiled menacingly at his belt. "Why don't you educate us?" Then, Bob's eyes tracked the movement, but his expression remained impassive. "You sure that's what you want? Education can be expensive." The tension in the air thickened palpably. Even the morning birds seemed to have fallen silent, as if nature itself was holding its breath. Sarah watched her father, seeing subtle changes in his posture that the bikers clearly missed the slight shift in his weight onto the balls of his feet. The way his hands hung loose but ready at his sides, fingers slightly curled. "You got a smart mouth for an old man," Bulldog snarled, his patience finally snapping completely. "Maybe we start by shutting it. Permanently." He nodded sharply to Tank and Sullivan, who began to move forward simultaneously. Bob didn't back away. He didn't raise his hands defensively. He didn't show any outward sign of fear. He simply stood there, a picture of deceptive calm, waiting. "Last chance," Bob said quietly, his voice almost lost in the sudden tension. "Walk away now, and we forget this happened." Bulldog pulled the heavy chain from his belt, letting it dangle with a menacing clink. "Oh, we're way past walking away. Old man, way past that." The morning sun broke fully through the clouds then, casting harsh, stark shadows across the dock. In that instant, as the bikers tensed for action, Sarah saw something change deep within her father's eyes. The calm was still there, but now there was something else behind it, something cold, focused, and dangerous. Something that spoke of battles fought and won in places far, far removed from this peaceful marina. The iron serpents were about to learn why some waters run far deeper than they appear, and why the quietest predators are often the most lethal. Tank moved first, his massive frame charging toward Bob with the brutish confidence of someone who likely relied on sheer size and had rarely lost a physical confrontation. His huge fist cut through the morning air, aimed squarely at the older man's jaw. But it connected with nothing but mist. Bob's movement was so subtle, so incredibly efficient, that it took Tank a full second to realize he'd missed entirely. Bob hadn't dramatically dodged. He'd simply shifted his weight and turned his shoulder perhaps an inch, letting the punch sail harmlessly past. "The hell?" Tank muttered, stumbling slightly as his own momentum carried him forward. Bulldog watched, the chain hanging loose in his grip, as his enforcer clumsily regained his balance. Something didn't feel right. The old fisherman shouldn't have been able to move that fast, that smoothly. Having trouble, Bob asked quietly, still standing in almost the same relaxed pose, as if nothing significant had happened. Tank snarled, "Frustración evidente," and launched another attack, this time throwing a clumsy combination of punches that would have easily laid out any normal man his father's age. But Bob wasn't there for any of them. Each subtle movement a slight lean, a minor pivot, a barely perceptible sidestep took him just inches out of harm's way, executed with an economy of motion that spoke volumes of years of ingrained training. "Stand still, old man." Tank's frustration boiled over as he swung wildly, missing again. "Why?" Bob's voice remained infuriatingly calm. "You seem to be doing fine on your own." Mike Sullivan, seeing his larger companion struggle, stepped forward, pulling his knife. The blade caught the morning sun as he flicked it open with a practiced, intimidating snap. "Let's see you dance around this." "Pops." Sarah took an instinctive step forward, a cry of warning on her lips. But Bob's voice stopped her cold. "Stay where you are. Honey, everything's under control." Bulldog laughed, but there was a distinct edge of uncertainty creeping into it now. "Control. You're outnumbered. Old-timer. And now you've got steel to deal with." "Numbers," Bob said softly, his eyes flicking between the charging Tank and the advancing Sullivan with the knife. "Don't mean much if you don't know how to use them." Sullivan lunged with the knife, aiming low, while Tank came in high from the other side. It should have been a perfect pincer movement, an inescapable trap. Instead, Bob moved between them with a fluid grace that defied his appearance, in a motion too quick for most eyes to follow. He used Tank's own forward momentum, redirecting him with a hip check and a precisely placed hand, sending the big man sprawling onto the dock with a surprised grunt. Simultaneously, he parried Sullivan's knife hand, locking the wrist with a grip of steel and twisting. What the Sullivan started, but his words cut off in a sharp gasp as Bob applied just a fraction more pressure to his wrist joint. "Language," Bob chided gently, his voice still low. "My daughter's present." The knife clattered harmlessly to the dock. Bob released Sullivan with a small, sharp push that sent him staggering back directly into Bulldog. The gang leader had to step quickly to avoid being knocked over, his chain swinging wildly. "Who are you?" Bulldog demanded, his earlier arrogance cracking, replaced by a dawning confusion and a sliver of fear. "Just a fisherman," Bob replied mildly, retrieving Sullivan's knife and casually tucking it into his own belt. "Like I said, numbers can be deceiving." The other two bikers, who had been hanging back, now moved forward uncertainly. They'd never seen anyone handle Tank and Sullivan so easily, especially not some weather-beaten old fisherman. "Boss," one of them said hesitantly, a younger kid barely out of his teens. "Something ain't right here." Bulldog's face darkened with rage and embarrassment. "Shut up. He's just one old man. Take him." They rushed forward together, albeit with less conviction than before. But Bob moved like water, flowing between their uncoordinated attacks. One biker threw a wild punch that Bob guided smoothly past him, letting the man's own momentum carry him straight into his companion. They collided with a grunt, stumbling over each other in a heap. Sarah watched from the sidelines, her heart still racing. But her fear was now mixed with a powerful, burgeoning emotion, pride. She'd never seen her father fight before, never truly known this hidden side of him existed. Yet here he was, handling 5 dangerous, armed men with the same calm precision he used to navigate storm-tossed waters or repair a complex engine. "Dad," she called out suddenly as Tank, groaning, struggled to his feet again behind him. "Behind you." But Bob was already moving, anticipating the attack without needing to turn. He stepped smoothly aside as Tank's wild, desperate charge carried him straight into one of the thick wooden dock posts. The solid thunk of skull meeting seasoned timber echoed across the suddenly quiet marina. Tank dropped like a sack of potatoes, unconscious before he hit the deck. Bob turned slowly, surveying the remaining conscious biker's bulldog, Sullivan nursing his wrist, and the 2 younger ones tangled on the planks. "Anyone else?" Bob asked, still in that same unnervingly conversational tone. Bulldog's knuckles whitened around the heavy chain still clutched in his hand. "What kind of fisherman are you?" "The kind," Bob replied, his gaze locking onto Bulldog's. "Who's giving you one last chance to leave?" He nodded towards Tank's unconscious form. "Take your friend there, and go, before this gets serious." Serious. Bulldog's laugh now had a distinct edge of hysteria to it. "You think this is a game?" "No," Bob said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming gravelly. "I think this is you making a series of increasingly poor decisions. Would you like to make another one?" Sullivan had regained his feet, rubbing his throbbing wrist and glaring at Bob with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "Boss, this guy, he's not normal." "Shut up," Bulldog snapped, though his eyes darted nervously towards Bob. "All of you, take him down. Now." The remaining conscious bikers looked at each other. Their earlier confidence completely evaporated in the face of Bob's inexplicable, almost effortless skill. Even Bulldog seemed less sure. His chain now held almost defensively rather than as an offensive weapon. "I could do this all day," Bob told him calmly, his stance unchanged. "But I've got charters booked this afternoon, and I'd hate to disappoint my clients." "You think this is over?" Bulldog demanded, though he took another small, involuntary step back. "You think you can embarrass the Iron Serpents and just walk away?" "I think," Bob replied, his voice level, "that you came looking for easy prey and found something else entirely. The question is, are you smart enough to learn from the experience?" Bulldog's face contorted with impotent rage, with a roar born more of desperation than conviction. He swung the heavy chain in a deadly, whistling arc aimed directly at Bob's head. The metal flashed through the air, and then Bob simply wasn't there anymore. The chain's momentum carried Bulldog completely off balance. Suddenly, he felt himself falling, the world spinning around him as Bob used his own weight and motion against him with a swift, almost invisible leg sweep. Bulldog hit the dock hard, the breath knocked out of him, the chain clattering away across the wooden planks. He looked up, dazed, to find Bob standing over him, still with that same infuriatingly calm expression. "Now," Bob said quietly, his eyes holding Bulldog's gaze. about that education you wanted. The morning sun had risen fully now, burning away the last remnants of the mist. In its clear, unforgiving light, the iron serpent's fearsome reputation seemed to be evaporating just as quickly, leaving them looking like what they really were, bullies who had finally, fatally, picked the wrong target. And Robert Bob Miller, the simple fisherman they'd so badly underestimated, was about to teach them exactly why that was a mistake they wouldn't soon forget. Bulldog struggled clumsily to his feet, his leather cut dusty from the fall, his earlier arrogance completely shattered, replaced by something approaching genuine fear. The casual, almost disdainful ease with which Bob had handled his attacks, especially the chain, had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. "You've had training," Bulldog accused, backing away slightly, his eyes wide. "Military." Bob's expression didn't change, but something flickered deep in his eyes, a ghost of memories surfacing. "Does it matter?" "Boss," Mike Sullivan called out urgently, still nursing his twisted wrist. "I've seen moves like that before. My cousin, he was force recon. This ain't just some random training." Sarah watched the realization finally dawn, spreading across the remaining bikers' faces like cold dread. She'd known about her father's past her whole life, of course, but seeing him in action was profoundly different from hearing the sanitized stories. The calm, patient man who taught her to tie intricate fishing knots and read subtle weather patterns was still there, undeniably. But now she was seeing the warrior beneath the surface, the lethal efficiency honed by years of service. "Navy SEAL," Bob said quietly, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent dock. 15 years. Retired now. But some things you don't forget. Bulldog's face went pale, the last vestiges of color draining away. "Seal." "Which explains," Bob continued conversationally, his gaze sweeping over the subdued bikers, "why you're all still conscious. If I wanted you hurt, you'd be hurt. Instead, I'm trying to teach you something. Something about respect." One of the younger bikers, the one who had hesitated earlier, started edging almost imperceptibly toward his motorcycle. "Boss, maybe we should." "Nobody moves," Bulldog snapped, though his voice shook slightly. Fear warred with ingrained pride. "We're the Iron Serpents. We don't back down." Bob sighed softly, a sound of weary resignation. "Pride's going to get you killed one day. Today, it's just going to get you embarrassed." Tank groaned from his position on the dock, finally regaining a semblance of consciousness. He pushed himself slowly to his knees, shaking his head to clear it, looking utterly bewildered. What happened?" "Your boss is about to make another mistake," Bob told him calmly. "You might want to stay down for this one." Bulldog's hand moved stealthily toward his back waistband, and Sarah saw the quick, deadly glint of metal. "Dad." But Bob had already moved. The handgun Bulldog was reaching for never cleared his waistband before Bob closed the distance between them in two blindingly fast strides. His movements were precise, economical, honed by years of close-quarters combat experience. Bulldog gasped as his arm was expertly locked behind him in a painful hold, the gun falling harmlessly to the dock planks. "That," Bob said, his voice hardening for the first time. losing all trace of calm and resonating with cold fury. Was your biggest mistake yet? With a sharp twist and a perfectly executed sweep of his leg, Bob sent Bulldog sprawling onto the dock again. Face down this time. The gun skittered across the wood, stopping near Sarah's feet. She picked it up carefully, holding it away from herself as if it might bite her. Her hand surprisingly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. 15 years as a SEAL. Bob continued, looking down at the subdued gang leader. You know what that means. It means I've forgotten more about combat than you'll ever know. It means I've faced threats that would make you wet yourself. And it means... His voice dropped, becoming intensely personal and dangerous. That threatening my daughter was the dumbest thing you've ever done. Mike Sullivan took a halting step forward, hands raised slightly in a placating gesture. We didn't know. That's the point. Bob cut him off sharply, his gaze sweeping over all of them now. You never know. You ride into town, throw your weight around, think you're the biggest predator in the water. But there's always something deeper in the dark. Something that's seen real combat, faced real enemies. He turned to address all of them, his voice carrying the unmistakable weight of command. I've fought in places you've never heard of, against enemies you couldn't imagine. You think you're tough because you can intimidate fishermen and shopkeepers. Try facing down actual terrorists. Try swimming through hostile waters with bullets tracking your movement. The bikers stood frozen, their earlier bravado completely evaporated, replaced by a mixture of awe and terror. Even Bulldog remained on the ground, no longer trying to get up. The fight visibly drained from him. But you know what the real difference is between you and me? Bob continued, his voice regaining some of its earlier calm, but now imbued with undeniable authority. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to strut around intimidating people to feel strong. Real strength is knowing when not to fight. Sarah watched her father, seeing him in a completely new light. All these years, she'd known about his service, but she'd never truly understood the depth of what it meant. Now, watching him handle 5 dangerous men with such calculated precision and moral clarity, she was beginning to grasp the vastness of his experience and the quiet power he possessed. So here's what's going to happen, Bob said, his voice level, but carrying an unmistakable note of finality. You're going to pick up your unconscious friend. You're going to get on your bikes. You're going to ride out of Eagles Crest Marina. And you're going to remember this moment every single time you think about bothering peaceful people. Bulldog managed to push himself to his knees, his face a mask of conflicting emotions: fear, anger, but mostly profound humiliation. You think this is over? That depends entirely on you, Bob replied calmly. I can keep demonstrating exactly why this is a bad idea for you. Or you could be smart and walk away. Your choice. But I should warn you, I got all day. And so far, he added pointedly, I haven't even started trying. Tank, still groggy from his forceful encounter with the dock post, staggered slowly to his feet. Boss, he's right. We should go. Shut up. Bulldog snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. No, you shut up. Mike Sullivan cut in, surprising everyone, especially Bulldog. He looked directly at his leader, his face grim. We came here looking for easy money, not a fight with a damn Navy SEAL. I'm out. The younger bikers nodded quickly in agreement, already backing slowly toward their motorcycles, relief warring with fear on their faces. Only Bulldog remained defiant, kneeling on the dock, though he made no move to retrieve his chain or challenge Bob further. Bob watched them with the quiet patience of a man who has waited out long sieges and understood the turning points in conflicts. "Pride's a funny thing," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "Right now, it's telling you to keep fighting. But wisdom's telling you to cut your losses." The morning sun had climbed higher, burning away the last vestiges of the mist. In its clear, bright light, the Iron Serpent's fearsome reputation seemed to be dissolving just as quickly, leaving them looking like what they really were, bullies who had finally met someone they couldn't intimidate. And Robert Bob Miller, the quiet fisherman they'd so badly underestimated, wasn't finished teaching them about real strength yet. Bulldog remained on his knees, his world crumbling around him as his gang began to splinter. Mike Sullivan had already started walking resolutely toward his bike, followed closely by the two younger members. Only Tank remained hesitant beside his leader, uncertainty showing clearly on his bruised face. "You walk away from this," Bulldog called desperately to his retreating men, his voice cracking. "You're out. You hear me? Out for good." Bob's voice cut through the tension, calm and clear. "Sounds like a promotion to me." Sullivan paused, turning back slightly. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Means you've got a choice," Bob replied calmly, addressing Sullivan but loud enough for all to hear. "Stay with someone who'd get you killed over his bruised pride, or walk away and be your own man. Some leaders protect their people. Others use them as shields." Bulldog struggled awkwardly to his feet, his face flushed red with a mixture of rage and deep humiliation. "You don't know anything about leadership." 3 tours as team leader in active combat zones, Bob said quietly, the words landing with heavy impact. "I know more than you think." "Know what else I know? A real leader doesn't sacrifice his people for his ego." Sarah watched the younger bikers exchange quick, meaningful glances. She could see the impact of her father's words, the way they were hitting home with men who'd probably never questioned their choices, or their leader, before. "They're just afraid," Bulldog spat out, trying to regain control. "Afraid of one old man." "No," Bob corrected him calmly. "They're showing intelligence. Something you should try." He turned to address the other bikers directly, his gaze sweeping over Sullivan, Tank, and the 2 younger men. "You all have training, don't you? Military." Sullivan nodded slowly, his biker persona fading, revealing something underneath. "Most of us got out, couldn't find our way back to civilian life. The club, it gave us something. Structure, purpose, brotherhood." Bob's voice carried understanding now, a shift from command to connection. "But this isn't brotherhood. This is bullying. And you're better than that." Tank stepped forward then, his massive frame somehow seeming smaller. "Burdened. I was Army. 2 tours in Afghanistan. Got out. Felt lost. Thought the club would give me back what I was missing." "And did it?" Bob asked gently. "No," Tank admitted quietly, his voice thick with emotion. Just made me something I never wanted to be." Bulldog's face contorted with fury. Traitors. All of you. They're not betraying you, Bob told him, his voice firm but not angry. They're remembering who they really are. Soldiers. Warriors. Men who once stood for something more than terrorizing small towns. Sarah saw tears glistening in Tank's eyes now. Something hard and long-held finally breaking through his tough exterior. The other bikers had stopped moving toward their bikes, caught in the unexpected gravity of the moment. You know what I see when I look at you? Bob continued, his gaze encompassing all the former soldiers. I see men who served their country, who knew real brotherhood, real purpose, and somewhere along the way, you lost it. Started following someone who never understood what that really meant. Mike Sullivan turned back fully now, his expression troubled, conflicted. After getting out, nothing felt right. Nothing felt real. I know, Bob said softly, and the depth of understanding in his voice was unmistakable. Believe me, I know. When I first got out, I was lost too. Took me a long time to find my way back. To understand that the strength we learned in service isn't for dominating others. It's for protecting them. Bulldog made a slight, desperate move toward his fallen gun, still lying near Sarah's feet. But Bob's sharp glance froze him in place. Don't, Bob warned quietly. You've made enough mistakes today. Sarah stepped forward, carefully keeping the gun pointed safely at the ground. Dad, what should I do with this? Unload it, Bob instructed calmly, just like I taught you. She did so with practiced, efficient ease, drawing surprised looks from the bikers. The magazine dropped cleanly into her palm, and she expertly racked the slide to check the chamber, ensuring it was clear with professional precision. You taught your daughter to handle weapons, Sullivan asked, a note of respect creeping into his voice. I taught her to respect them, Bob corrected firmly. There's a difference. Just like there's a difference between being strong and being a bully. The morning had grown warmer, the sun now high enough to cast shorter shadows across the dock. In its bright light, the changes in the bikers' faces were clear to see: shame, recognition, the slow, painful dawn of understanding. It's not too late, Bob told them, his voice carrying conviction. Any of you, the men you were before the soldiers, the warriors, the protectors, they're still in there. You just forgot them for a while. Tank wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his large hand. What were we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? Start by remembering who you are, Bob said simply. There are programs for veterans. People who understand what you're going through. People who can help you find your way back. Bulldog, seeing his authority completely evaporate, launched himself forward suddenly in a last, desperate act of defiance. But Bob sidestepped smoothly, almost casually, letting the gang leader's momentum carry him past. In one fluid motion, Bob took Bulldog's legs out from under him again, pinning him firmly face down on the dock. Still haven't learned, Bob sighed, applying just enough pressure to keep him subdued. Some lessons take longer than others, I suppose. The other bikers made no move to help their former leader. Instead, they watched with a mixture of embarrassment and undeniable relief, as if witnessing the overdue end of something that should have ended long ago. Your choice wasn't just about today, Bob told the pinned man quietly. It was about every day you led these men down the wrong path. Every time you made them less than what they could be. In the distance, the faint wail of police sirens began to grow louder. Tom Henderson must have called them after all, despite Bulldog's earlier boasts. Sarah saw the younger bikers tense instinctively, ready to flee, but her father's voice stopped them. "Stay," he commanded, and the quiet authority in his voice, the ingrained habit of command, made them freeze. Face this. Start making better choices. It's what soldiers do. The morning wind carried the clean scent of lake water and pine, a reminder of the peace that existed before the iron serpents arrived. But now, as the sirens grew closer, something else hung in the air, the fragile, tentative possibility of redemption, of finding a better path. And for most of the men standing on that dock, it felt like the first real thing they had felt in years. Two police cruisers pulled swiftly into the marina parking lot, lights flashing silently against the bright morning sun. Sheriff Brody stepped out first, his hand resting cautiously on his holster, his experienced eyes taking in the scene, the scattered bikers, Tank's bruised face, Sullivan's swollen wrist, Bulldog pinned on the dock by Bob. Behind him, Deputy Miller, no relation, emerged from the second vehicle, looking equally surprised. Bob maintained his hold on Bulldog, but addressed the approaching officers calmly. "Morning, Sheriff. Situation's under control." Sheriff Brody took in the scene, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Looks like we missed quite a party." "Bob." He recognized Tank and Sullivan. "Iron serpents." "Just a misunderstanding about marina management," Bob replied mildly, releasing Bulldog as Deputy Miller moved in with handcuffs. These gentlemen were confused about who owns the property. Bulldog struggled futilely as the cuffs clicked shut. "This is assault. I want him arrested." "Funny," Sheriff Brody drawled, looking at Bulldog, then at Bob. Tom Henderson's call mentioned something about armed suspects threatening his tenants. Said something about a gun being pulled. "Two." Sarah stepped forward, carefully holding out the unloaded handgun and the separate magazine. "Here, Sheriff. This is what he tried to use on my father." Deputy Miller moved to secure the weapon, his trained eyes noting the professional way Sarah handled it. "You know your way around firearms, miss." "My father taught me," she said simply, "about respect, responsibility, and when not to use them." The sheriff looked at the remaining biker Sullivan, Tank, and the two younger men who hadn't moved toward their motorcycles, despite the obvious temptation to flee now that law enforcement had arrived. "You boys are a long way from your usual territory." Mike Sullivan stepped forward, his military bearing surprisingly asserting itself despite his biker appearance. "Sir, we'd like to surrender ourselves. Voluntarily." Bulldog's head snapped up from where the deputy was helping him stand. "What? You can't." "Shut up, Jake," Tank rumbled, moving to stand beside Sullivan, his massive shoulders squared. "We're done following you into the gutter." Sheriff Brody studied the two men thoughtfully. Surprised. "Surrender. Huh. That's not usually how these situations go down." "No, sir," Sullivan agreed, his gaze steady. But we've had some sense knocked into us. Figuratively speaking, he added, glancing respectfully at Bob. These men are veterans. Sheriff, Bob said quietly, stepping back smoothly as Deputy Miller led a cursing bulldog toward a patrol car. They lost their way for a bit, but I think they're ready to find it again. The sheriff's expression softened slightly. His own service in the Gulf War gave him a particular understanding of veteran struggles. Is that right? He looked at Tank. Tank straightened his spine unconsciously, falling into a military stance. Yes, sir. Army, 10th Mountain Division. Lost my way after getting out. But, well, Mr. Miller helped us remember some important things. Navy SEAL, Sheriff Brody said, nodding towards Bob with newfound understanding. He has a way of making lessons stick. The younger bikers, following their comrade's lead, stepped forward quietly to surrender themselves. Only Bulldog continued to resist verbally, cursing and spitting threats as Deputy Miller secured him in the back of the cruiser. You're all dead. The club will hear about this. They'll. The club, Sullivan interrupted firmly, turning to face his former leader through the car window, is about to undergo some significant changes in leadership, assuming any of us stay with it at all. Bob watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. Sheriff, these men might benefit from that veterans program you mentioned last month, the one running out of Portland. Thinking the same thing, Sheriff Brody agreed, looking at the surrendered bikers, assuming they're serious about making changes. We are, Tank said quietly, earnestly. Sir, we. He struggled with the words. Years of pin-up emotion trying to break free. Take it easy, soldier, Bob told him gently. One step at a time. Sarah moved to stand beside her father, watching as the deputies efficiently processed the surrendered men. Dad, you knew, didn't you, about them being veterans? Suspected, Bob corrected softly. Saw it in their movements, their reactions, even under the bravado. Men like that, they're not lost because they're bad. They're lost because they're searching for something they had before. Sheriff Brody directed the other bikers to sit on a nearby bench while he made some calls on his radio. None of them made any attempt to flee. Their postures reflected their military backgrounds now that the forced biker persona had fallen away completely. Mr. Miller, Sullivan called out respectfully. I thank you. Not for the fighting, but for, he gestured vaguely, searching for the right words. For seeing us. Really seeing us. Bob nodded. A simple acknowledgement. You're soldiers. You just forgot for a while. Now you get to remember. The morning had grown warmer, the lake's surface glittering peacefully with sunlight. The chaos of earlier had been replaced by a different kind of tension, the quiet tension of men facing their choices, their futures, their potential for redemption. What happens now? Sarah asked quietly, looking at the subdued men on the bench. Now, Bob replied, his gaze steady. These men get a chance to find their way back. Real strength isn't in defeating an enemy. Honey, it's in helping them become something better. Sheriff Brody returned, tucking his radio away. Got good news. Veterans program has space. Judge Harrison's willing to consider alternative sentencing, given the circumstances and their service records. He looked directly at the bikers. Assuming you're all willing to do the work. Tank and Sullivan exchanged glances with their younger companions. The moment stretched, heavy with possibility. Yes, sir, they replied in unison. The response automatic, ingrained from years of service. As the morning continued to unfold, Hannah watched the quiet transformation taking place on her family's dock. The iron serpents who had arrived, full of menace and bravado, were gone, replaced by men who might, with time and help, find their way back to who they once were. And her father, the quiet fisherman who had once again proven that true strength lies not in violence, but in wisdom and compassion, stood watching over it all with the patient eyes of a man who understands that some victories don't require any battles at all. The real fight, the one for redemption, was only just beginning. We hope you were captivated by Bob's story. Did it resonate with you? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed watching how courage and compassion can change lives, please consider subscribing to our channel. We bring you powerful stories like this every day. And hitting that subscribe button ensures you won't miss out on the next incredible journey. Click subscribe now, and we'll see you in the next video.